All right, guys and girls out there with CABA, Tim Hollenshade. I have Jill with me here. Jill, I was with her dad in another segment here earlier, Ralph. Jill of Atlantic Tire and Carman, grew up in this field right here in Baltimore with me. We're about similar ages, and I just thought it would be really cool to get you on camera here as we've grown up here in the Baltimore automotive aftermarket together. So, Jill, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to actually sit down with you for once. I kind of feel like we missed a giant hole somewhere in the middle of our craziness.
15 years.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like that. It's kind of like deja vu. It's kind of like
Corona handshake.
Yeah,
there we go. We're staying relatively 6 feet apart here, so we can drop the mask for the TV cameras.
We're all safe. We all mind our business when we're in public and do our duty. So it be what it is.
All right, so I was thinking a lot in anticipation for our segment today, and I guess the first one to start is, why don't you give us a little background on, so you're the next generation taking over what is a long-term staple Baltimore large sale tire distributor business. So just walk us through the business. I mean, you have retail in the front, a little bit of wholesale tire, so go ahead.
So we basically do a weird split, honestly, is probably the easiest way to put it. We have a massive amount of tires because we do wholesale. That allows us to bounce off on the retail side and have more than what most people would ever be able to stock normally, which when a customer comes in need, it helps us to actually be able to provide for that need a little bit easier than having to wait for somebody to get it to us most of the time. With that being said, we do use a number of distributors also to pull in other brands and other sizes that aren't as common for us to actually have in the building. My background comes more from, I guess when I was 15, I started basically playing around in the warehouse, is the nicest way to put it.
I met you so my first earliest memories of you and I in this industry together was you delivering with, I think it was an S10 Chevrolet truck. Saturdays, mostly Saturday hot shot deliveries, because we were, everybody's in a rush on Saturdays.
That sounds about right. I was 19 and really green and pretty stupid at that point. It was pretty much a knock on the bedroom door. What are you doing today? And
mine was very similar. You're not sitting here playing video games.
Mine was more like, wait, do you have time between school and what your other part-time job is to actually come down and help us? And it's kind of like, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, when I started out at first, it was like, it was on the weekends just simply helping around the warehouse. And then it turned into, well, you can't work here unless you have a job. And I don't know how that didn't work, but for some reason or other, I had to have a job as well as being down here. It was like this wasn't counted as a job. So I went off and did a few, staple teenage stoogey jobs and went off. And then it was like when I got to be 19, I was in, first year of college basically, and it was, hey, or what are you doing? And it's like, okay, well, I have time today and I have time tomorrow. Well, that's enough to fill us in and do whatever deliveries need to be done. And if that was what was going to patch a hole, well, that was some cheap labor.
So that got you through and in this industry for a long time, but now there's been a big change that kind of also spurred me wanting to get on camera with you. As you're joining back in, your dad's been a really serious supporter and a long-term driver behind CABA, which is where we find ourselves today, here to carry the torch on. But on that note of carrying the torch on, you are now kind of the general manager, female general manager of a pretty staple long-term. We're both kind of earning our stripes in our own respective family businesses.
I don't think there's any doubt about stripes. I think we go through more of a warpath, and then we figure out what bruises and cuts we got to patch up, and then figure out how we're going to move forward, basically, is what we end up with, more or less.
So you've switched from, we were just talking a lot about the wholesale tire side, so now you're kind of on the retail, the front lines.
Oh yeah.
So what's that been like for the last year or so?
Well, I left the wholesale, actually left the company more or less to explore, I guess would be the nicest way to put it, because I felt like there was more out there, more than just wholesale. And I dealt with customers, and it was very easy for me to translate my skills of dealing with a wholesale customer who's basically dealing with a customer of their own, and I have to sit back and explain to my, wonderful buyer of how they have to sell their tires to their customer. So it makes it a very easy leap for me to then have to go and sell directly to the customer. Okay. And so I actually left and became a true official service writer at another location and worked there for a little while. And probably should have said my first red flag was truly for the fact that my district manager came in and felt the need to immediately remind me I was in a male-dominated industry. And I proceeded to tell him after 10 years of working in this industry, I was quite well aware of that. And my skills should be perfectly fine to handle any situation.
So to clarify, we were saying we're not using the businesses by name, but yours would be deemed a large chain line of chain stores, not franchisee by nature.
No,
okay.
No.
So it's a pretty well. I mean, I would think there's a lot of standardization behind, a lot of process, top down.
They had a lot of top down, but it was more of there was a lot of people from various within multiple franchise companies that had come in because this is a relatively new enterprise for this particular.
They're
company.
They're growing fast.
They're growing
in their
and
districts.
And at the same time, they're in a way they could certainly balloon, and they had a really good overall and all we're a great company kind of aspect.
Sure. But that's reinforced though now that you're back in the family business full time and with new energy. It kind of has driven home the customer service.
Oh yeah,
that we've talked in your segment as you were over listening with your dad. It's really went from it's almost as quasi we're truly a service based business, but it's transactional and commoditized in some ways. What's your take on that?
Well, this is what I've said, and this is kind of something kind of funny is that coming from the more female side of things, I'll say this, that they're worried that I'm not going to be aggressive enough and a male's not going to take me seriously. And you battle that no matter, if I was, I understand. It is what it is in this industry. And I have always said it's not about selling, it's about education. If the customer understands why you want them to do something to their vehicle, it's not a sale, it's because you need something done. And that makes that leap so much bigger. Sure. Of, okay, I need a battery because my volts are low. And that means that the next time it gets really hot or really, really cold, I may not start. Okay, that makes me understand in layman terms, I need a battery. Or hey, guess what? I got a nail in the sidewall on my tire and that cannot be repaired. And if I hit the wrong
But I saw a
bump,
YouTube video once.
Well, of course. We always have an internet example of how this can be done. But
so we talked. So
you can also go through that stuff very easily. That what you see is not necessarily always what is doable. I mean, that's what
there's
you have
a lot
to go
of misinformation out there for sure. We feel that burden, especially more. That's not gotten better. That's something that's kind of becoming more commonplace. You mentioned education. Educating the customers, but we as general managers and managers in training in our respective businesses, we have to educate internally a lot.
Oh yeah,
so
without a doubt. I mean, I will say and this is coming from this side of things, is just coming up front. I will say I'm very kind of new on my counter at this point, but from the experiences I have, during my exploration, really did give me the opportunity to explore kind of various different methods of things. And there are certainly things that are glaringly we don't do, and then there's glaringly things that why don't we do this more? And the biggest thing for me is if a car comes in here, I want to make sure that every concern that customer has is written down and taken care of. It is so important that we go from, it was like a 3-step process. You go through, okay, first of all, what did your customer walk in the door to ask you about today? Your second concern is, is there going to be a major safety failure anytime soon? From the brakes to maybe even taillights, anything basic like that you can walk up to a car in 2 seconds and say, that's not right. Okay, and then lastly, maybe we'll deal with some maintenance items. And, maybe that car that you want to keep to a million miles or whatever. We'll deal with that last. But I really think that 3-step process is something that even my guys they're good at the first 2. We're really solid on that. We haven't ever really jumped to the maintenance side yet. I feel like that's an important, critical role.
You guys are shifting a little bit from talking to you and your father. Before it was a lot of tires, a lot of rims and tires, shifting over to the maintenance, the scheduled maintenance. And it is there's so many different makes and models of cars on the road, and they're all in some ways very different, some ways similar.
But even the basic stuff like an air filter, okay? I'm not talking like, oh my gosh, we gotta like do major maintenance stuff. Even an air filter. We just had one in here last week. We all got a good laugh at it. The filter was so dirty, it wasn't allowing the AC to come through the vents.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it's something that simple that, most people wouldn't put 2 and 2 together. My guys go take one look at it and we're all laughing going, is this for real?
So to instill, there's power in the process. That when you deal with a certain volume of cars over time, if that process pays off, and it can be tweaked over time as well.
Absolutely.
So let's pivot just a little bit. The process of training young technicians. So you and I feel unique as you. We've talked offline a little bit that I feel that our generation was skipped over by this industry. But the more I've thought about it, or kind of talked to different people with plumbing businesses, HVAC, roofing, all the skilled trades kind of were overlooked for our generation. That everybody was just, hey, go to college, go, or do this. This is a good job. This isn't a good job. But we realize now that there's a good home that we have here in the automotive aftermarket, not just in Baltimore, that this is repeated across many, many cities and metropolitan areas. So what do you feel was missed on our generation? Like, you and I were in shops, so we naturally learned the lingo. You understood with the behaviors of the people and some of the stubbornness and or the not as accepting. I've dealt with mine just being, it was little Tim to all of a sudden, like, Tim's the one telling us how to fix, this TPMS system on this car that's giving us trouble. That's hard for some people to, realize what's happened, what seems like overnight, but we've been around for a pretty long time now.
Well, the craziest thing is, in China, jumping off of that a little bit, I literally had somebody walk in here a couple weeks back, and I happened to be floating through, and if you don't notice by now, I look extremely like my dad. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm okay with it.
I'm not going to be the judge of that. We'll let everybody out there watch it.
I literally had an older gentleman walk in and go, I remember you when you were in diapers. And it's like, well, I'm glad, because now you can remember me as the woman that helped you today. Yep. And you just have to progress to that level of, it's not a bad thing. I'm here. I've grown with the business, and let's keep growing. I think that's the best adjective. As far as our generation getting missed, absolutely. It was all about get that degree. It was that piece of paper that you had to get. Everybody was pushing towards that. Nobody talked about the technical schools. I mean, I have a business communications degree from Stevenson, if we can say that. But,
absolutely. I'm a Johns Hopkins alumni here in Baltimore. But I think even with that, like, going through, I'll tell you this story, and this is maybe we'll make it or not, but I literally was 21 on my birthday. I drove out to Findlay, Ohio to go to meet with some distributor. We'll go with that today. And it was a big stinking college because I was going to miss a day of class. And I literally looked at a professor who said that they were going to dock my grade because I wasn't going to be in class. And I said, do you understand that this is the career I want to travel? And in order to do that, I need to go to this seminar. And it might be 7 hours away in another state. But this is going to be more educational for me in those few hours than missing an hour of your class on that day. And she did not dock me, and I will be forever thankful for that. And she pretty much realized at that point I was probably the most stubborn kid she'd ever run into. And but that's a skill also. The beauty in that is, that was delivered from your time in this industry. That you had learned to speak up for yourself, as I had to at times. I'm sure hurdles you've had to face are much more significant than mine in some of those regards.
And I think a lot of that, going back to that in some ways, it's can I be tough enough and yet walk that fine line of being a female? I mean, it's certainly, there's days that I can be a sailor, and there's no doubt about it. If you PO me, it's going to get ugly. But you come from a hard line of how do you walk that soft line and how do you walk the hard line? And I learned it very young because I was down here. And I mean, I graduated college in 3.5 years, and that was a big,
this is not an easy line of work. I mean, that's one that I try to instill as we've started the CABA Learning Lab, which we're migrating towards the training. This is not easy. It's long hours. It's physical. We're on the heels of a 2-week heat wave here.
Yeah.
100 degree heat index, and everybody's expected to show up to work every day. They have to make, we as technicians, and me still most of my time on the shop floor, we have to make responsible decisions at night about, limiting the drinking consumption because of hydration purposes. I mean, you go out for a night partying in the middle of a heat wave, the next day, forget the hangover. You're not going to make it till 6 o'clock.
Well, and going back to that, I guess from sitting on the front counter, okay, I might be in the AC more than you guys are, which is nice. But you know what? I'm still going to go out there and look at every single car and walk around every single car that comes in here to see if there's something else going on that, maybe I should let my techs be aware of, that, hey, we got some damage on a car. Hey, this doesn't look quite right. Maybe we need to check that out a little bit further. And then on top of that, I'm running from the front to the back pretty regularly with the way this building's set up.
There's no time to sit down. I don't know why they put chairs in all the front.
I will say the few minutes I get in to sit are amazing, because it is one of the few moments when you can actually take a breath and say, okay, what still needs, I go through about midday every day and go, okay, we have these vehicles here, this is what needs to be done, this is my time frame. And I will say that's one of the big changes that I guess in this industry in general that we've seen, is we are shifting from that quick lube situation to they want their cars done right, and they don't care the time frame as long as you explain to them why you're taking the time.
Sure.
And that goes back to, again, we're explaining to the customer why we want the time with the vehicle. And that's been a very slow but very dramatic shift from me taking over, is because I was used to scheduling with everything I have done to the point where I know when I will know my schedule. I read this actually somewhere, I forget where it was. But one of the biggest things of a key of a great service writer is that you know what your schedule is, you know which text to put on which vehicles, and on top of that, then you have to understand what monkey wrenches can come out at you, and at the same time, you have to be prepared for when that car comes in. Okay, last time we saw it, we recommended brakes. So the minute that comes in, it's so-and-so, how can I help you today? We noticed that your last oil change that you happen to have a brake recommendation, we're gonna look on that again today. And just by having that familiarity, if you get to know your schedule and know which customers are coming in, it makes a huge personal impression on that customer that, oh my goodness, not only do they know I'm coming, they know my vehicle already. And it's really a big thing for me because they know my face, some of them, just from being around the business, but the ones that have no clue and all of a sudden it's a different face up front, it creates a whole nother level of personalization to that service.
So part of the change that you're talking about now is, I feel, a struggle that we both kind of face together, that we're the phase of, a lot of the times the technology that was coming into the field, be it the computers, even on the cars, it was more of a burden before. We're kind of at the point now where there's a lot of technology products out there to help with the things we're talking about. So it's kind of, before we did a lot of fighting it away to kind of not burden down our techs with glitching tablets or things like that. Well, now it's kind of actually can accelerate what's happening in the shop and give you the clarity from the computer of what's kind of coming on the next service for certain vehicles with recommended and things. So maybe that's one last one as we work towards closing our time together here today. How do you see the technology? Let's keep to the service writing and the sales, because we have a lot of CABA, member business owners out there watching. What do you feel the technology kind of has the most to deliver from the sales and the shop management kind of?
I think your biggest thing long term is going to be, how do we manage all the different service schedules for all these different vehicles? I haven't seen one single honestly program that you can pull up and say, I have a Subaru today. What at this interval am I going to need? Unless I go off site and find an individual.
Sure, like pumpkin on like a Honda, an older Honda Pilot.
Yeah.
The front differential that takes just the gear oil, not the VTM4 or the dual pump. Yeah. That little pumpkin case that only holds about 1 pint of fluid that nobody, even on, it's on a Ford all-wheel drive Ford Fusion as well. There's no line item in those maintenance schedules to tell anybody to go check that.
And I think that's where a lot of our industry has missed a little bit, is that it's not individualized for each vehicle that we see, and we have to kind of go hunting for that information. And I think as a small shop, we definitely fall on our butts when it comes to that.
We have to service all make and models, and we don't get to be familiar. I mean, I'm as a technician and still elbows deep in a lot of the cars. I mean, I'm in some ways jealous, I guess, of working on the same make, because we see that, at Hollenshade's, the volume that we see, we derive a lot of speed and additional revenue from additional sales, knowing what's wrong with these cars, just based on, we've seen 50 of those in the last 8 months, and here's the mileage, and we kind of know. Or even one like on certain Hyundai vehicles, the dome lights that stay stuck on are a parasitic draw. Right away, the doors. The doors from heck, because you got to pretty much either send them to a body shop or have like the knowledge to dig into those doors. All those things are awful. So a lot's changing. But anyway, any last minute thoughts for you? I mean, we'll definitely have to get you on again as you're getting more involved with CABA.
No. I mean, it's definitely, it's an industry that I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the next few years. But I think that what we're seeing is a good thing overall. And all, I think more and more people are starting to get interested in the industry again, because I think what's going on is that
it's a good job. It's still a good job. I think that's what's fallen lost on everybody. One, to go off topic of us for a minute, is I talked to a lot of guidance counselors. We're engaged with a few organizations I won't mention at this point, but with the CABA the Learning Lab model that we're doing, we're getting a lot of input from different stakeholders and guidance counselors. There's a journeyman HVAC technician is now making well over about $130,000 a year, and that's after 7 to 10 years of motivated dedication to a career. Nobody's there to tell those young kids that. So I like what you said, the energy with the energy about the industry, that people are excited about some of the cars. So Teslas and electrical vehicles and things like that pose some challenges. Hybrid drivetrains pose a challenge from a training and staying relevant and making sure that we can add the services. But that has also brought in some people. The autonomous cars has brought a lot of energy into our field again.
Well, I hate to say it, I think our industry, our particular little niche of millennial, I guess, groups, we did kind of fall into that whole category of you have to go to school. And I think the more the student debt has gone up, the more actually counselors are actually stepping back and saying, does everybody really need to go to school, and is everybody really ready to go to school? I mean, there's a big leap between being able to go to school and accomplish well versus just going to school and making it through. I mean, there's so many in our particular, especially
really well said.
Well, and the other thing too is we came out with a Great Recession. I mean, they've already said no matter what article you read, we are behind the 8 ball no matter what we do, because we have so much debt that we never were prepared to have, and the jobs that we were promised were never there. Sure. So I think what you're seeing in the end is you're seeing that they're looking for alternatives to the model that was created, because it hasn't worked as well.
And we're in the industry, like we've talked about with the customer service, or you kind of described for us, as the delivering on the expected. And that's something that I think our generation feels kind of misled in, that there was a lot of promises made that would come with that piece of paper, certain jobs, and a lot of people didn't actually see that pan out for themselves, and they're still left with the student debt either way. Let's close on one more that we didn't talk to, because we have the camera in front, and I'm sure we're not bored yet. The family side. So this is a lot of hours. This is a hard industry. I'm recently married, you as well. how has that worked? So full disclosure, me first, is it's been tough. You know, I said I work a lot of hours, and I don't think my spouse was prepared, you know, for what 60, 70 hours a week, day in and week in and week out really looks like. And I don't know, at some points I feel like it's family business, but then in other ways there's other guys that are not owners or not family members in our business that are still putting those same hours in. So how's that affected you?
Well, little bit of side note here that's kind of funny. My poor husband met me when I actually took him home in my V8 Colorado, is how he first met me. And then I showed up driving my 5-speed in heels when I took him out on our first date. So he was well informed of my background before we actually progressed. I don't think he truly understood to a degree, you know, how much this business was a passion as much as it was a pain at times. And that's difficult, you know, for anybody. I will say he's always worked very hard. I'm very proud of him. He actually has his master's degree. He's actually the breadwinner. Who would have ever thunk, considering everything we've been through?
We do share. So my wife's a pharmacist, and she's worked for the company for a very long time. And the benefit for us is hopefully in the long term, but we're still here working every day.
We're still here busting cans and hoping that somewhere there comes light. On a funny side note, Jeff, my cousin's wife, is a pharmacist as well. Right. So you should harass him about that, because I'm sure that we're all in this weird little funk. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that I'm blessed for the fact that he really hasn't ever shied away from the business. It's always been, okay, honey, if that's what you need to do. Really funny thing, I've got 3 rabbits. We were out of veggies tonight. He actually went to the store, so I didn't have to after my really long day.
Is he going to desanitize? Is he going to sanitize them from the corona, or do rabbits not get corona?
I don't think they've gotten that yet. But we do actually, there is actually, on a really weird twisted side note that probably shouldn't be recorded, there is actually a rabbit disease that is transferable with veggies, and you have to rinse them for at least 2 minutes is kind of the goal to get any kind of
so looking back, this skit is at least not only about car repair now. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's the side note of the night. But yes, so I mean, we don't have kids, we have rabbits. But, you know, in any case, no matter if you have a pet or a child or, you know, a significant other, it does take a lot of burden, and it takes time, and you have to make, I think the most important
a lot of up and downs.
I think honestly the most important thing about your family time and understanding that is when you are off, you are off. I mean, that is yes, Dad and I honestly have really random car conversations in the middle of the weekend while we're chilling next to the pool or on the deck or whatever. It's going to happen. But we also know that it's family time and we aren't going to discuss work. Like, okay, you guys can talk about this for like 20 minutes and then we're moving on. Yeah. And, you know, and that's all part of it. You have to put in those boundaries. And I think in any industry that you work, until you hit a premium level, I guess you could call it, if you want to make it, you're going to make the sacrifice one way or the other. And if you have a passion for it, hopefully your significant other realizes that this is not just a 9-to-5 job.
I don't think there's many people in this field that have been successful that have ever tried to make it a 9-to-5. No. We've grown up in the industry, or a lot even of the, you know, not just yourself and myself, but, you know, everybody kind of had a reason. They had tinkered with a toy or some type of project car and all that. So, yeah, this is definitely an industry of passion for sure.
It's a twisted mix between absolute, you have to have the drive and the passion to do it, and at the same time you have to understand that, you know, it's a twisted mix, like I said, between a passion and a joy and something you want to do. So the hours don't seem to matter to you, but you just have to remember they do matter to somebody else if you happen to have that going on as well. So I mean, you have to reserve that time for that significant other and remember that, you know, they are part of the
If I comment any more after what you're leaving on us right now, I'm going to get reprimanded after the fact when somebody watches this video. So I thank you for the wisdom. I look forward to joining you again soon, and hopefully for you know, some more positive things for CABA. But Jill?
We'll do this again, I'm sure.
Fall 2020?
Yeah, something. Hopefully not a second round of COVID.
No, not at all. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Jill, her dad Ralph before this, and I'm Tim Hollenshade here with CABA. Thank you very much. You have a good evening.